Hello, dear listeners. It warms my heart to have you here tonight. Tell me, what do winter evenings feel like where you are? Quiet? Cozy? A little mysterious? Thank you for sharing this moment with me, and for being part of our gentle community. If you haven't already, do subscribe so you never miss our nightly mysteries. Now then, settle in, breathe slowly. Tonight's story begins with a single whisper, tucked inside a knitting basket. A quiet afternoon rested over Street Mary Mead. Calm, unhurried. Miss Marple sat at her small table, knitting needles in hand, steady rhythm, soft movements, a gentle comfort filling the room. A ball of yarn rested beside her teacup, loose thread, warm color. Nothing unusual, except for the letter. A small envelope, placed neatly beside the yarn, plain paper, no name, no return address. Miss Marple glanced at it once, then again, not worried, not troubled, simply aware. She lifted her needles, continued stitching. One row, then another. Calm breath, quiet focus. The letter stayed still, unopened, waiting. Miss Marple paused to sip her tea. Warm, settling, gentle on the mind. Her eyes returned to the envelope, a small crease on its corner, as if handled twice, then placed down with care. She thought about that. Handled twice. Not once. Not casually. Someone had hesitated. Someone had changed their mind. She set her cup down, reached for her scissors, snipped a loose piece of wool, neatened the edge, returned to her knitting. The house stayed quiet, only the soft click of the needles, steady, comforting, familiar. But the letter changed the room, just slightly. A shift, a soft disturbance. The kind Miss Marple always noticed. She leaned back, adjusted her glasses, took another slow breath. The letter still waited. No urgency, no alarm, only a question. And Miss Marple loved questions. She tapped the envelope gently, light touch, testing the paper, feeling its weight. Thin, just one sheet inside. Someone had written something brief, something meant for her, not labeled, but placed where she would see it, where she could not miss it. She studied the handwriting on the front. Neat, even strokes. A controlled hand. No flourish, no haste. But she didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she resumed her knitting. Calm hands. Soft focus. Letting thoughts settle. She watched a line of stitches grow. Tidy work. Quiet pattern. Her mind moved with it. Someone in the village needed her. Someone felt troubled. Someone wanted to speak, but could not say things aloud. The envelope told her that much. Even without opening it, she placed her knitting aside, folded her hands, looked at the letter once more. A small crease, a thin paper, a quiet message waiting. She reached for it, paused, and then, right as she touched the flap, a soft sound outside broke the stillness. Just one step. On her garden path. Light, tentative, hesitant. Miss Marple turned her head, listened, waited. Another step did not follow, only silence. She looked back at the letter, her fingers resting on the seal, and she wondered who had come to her door and why they did not knock. Cliffhanger. She opened the envelope, and the first line made her sit perfectly still. Miss Marple held the letter lightly. Thin paper, simple fold, nothing remarkable at first glance. She opened it with care. Neat motion, quiet breath. Her glasses slid slightly down her nose. Inside lay one small sheet, plain, unlined, no signature, no sender. She noticed that immediately. A missing name always meant something. Someone hiding, someone unsure. She lifted the paper closer, read the first line. Only one line. Ask her why she lied. Miss Marple read it twice, then a third time. Short, direct, no greeting, no context. The words sat cold on the page, not loud, not frantic, just firm, purposeful. She placed the sheet on her table, flattened it with one fingertip, listened to the quiet around her. The message was meant for her alone. That much she knew. People in Street Mary Mead rarely sent letters. They sent messages. Stopped by, spoke across hedges, shared whispers during errands. A letter meant secrecy, or fear, or both. Miss Marple leaned back slowly, her mind already working, quiet gears turning, soft logic forming. Ask her why she lied. Who was her? The village held many hers, too many to guess. But someone wanted the question asked. Someone needed it asked. Someone trusted Miss Marple to handle it, gently, quietly, without fuss. She read the line again, measured the handwriting. Small strokes, even spacing. No hesitation. The writer was calm when writing. Certain, or trying to appear so. Miss Marple tapped the paper lightly. One tap, then another. A small rhythm to support her thinking. A lie. Someone had lied. Not unusual. Villages were built on tiny lies. Little ones, polite ones, protective ones, some harmless, some not. But someone cared enough about this one to deliver a letter in silence, placed at her table, while she was home, within reach, without being seen. She thought of the soft steps outside earlier. One step, then quiet, a retreat, or a hesitation. Someone standing in her garden, breathing, waiting, not knocking. She folded the letter again, exact lines, precise corners, and slid it into her knitting basket, not hidden, not exposed, just there, close enough for thought. Her kettle clicked softly as it cooled. Miss Marple lifted her cup, held it, didn't drink. Her mind drifted from name to name. Faces, voices, recent conversations, little remarks, small shifts in tone. Someone had lied recently. Someone had been caught in their own words. Someone now feared the consequence. She looked out her window. Calm street. Still houses. No movement. Nothing to suggest tension. But she felt it. A thin thread. Pulled tight. Leading somewhere. Miss Marple stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Lifted her shawl around her shoulders. She glanced at the letter again. Short line. Sharp meaning. Ask her why she lied. A simple instruction, yet full of trouble. She reached for her walking stick. Paused. Someone had waited outside earlier. Someone who wanted to speak, but left instead. She wondered who, and wondered what held them back. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple stepped toward the door just as a second envelope slid quietly through the letter slot. The parish hall felt busy in a quiet way. Steady movement. Soft voices. Nothing rushed. Nothing loud. The weekly knitting circle was gathering. Chairs scraped lightly across the floor. Tables shifted an inch here, an inch there. Mrs. Bantry handled most of it. She always did. Strong opinions, warm heart, firm hands. 8 chairs in a row, she muttered. Not 7, not 9, 8 keeps. Everyone settled. Miss Marple watched her from the doorway. Calm eyes, gentle interest, letting the scene unfold. Miss Pierce stood near the boxes of donated wool, sorting, stacking, checking labels. Her movements tidy but sharp. She separated colors, dark shades, light shades, leftover scraps. Her system never changed. A small sigh escaped her, barely audible, but Miss Marple heard it. A sigh usually meant something misplaced, something expected but not found. Miss Pierce reached into the box again, paused, looked a second time, longer, more deliberate. Miss Marple noticed that too. She always noticed repetition. It meant a search. A small one, a quiet one, but still a search. Across the hall, 2 women whispered. Heads close, hands still, their knitting untouched. Gone, one murmured. Missing since Monday, said the other. Miss Marple caught only fragments. Just enough. A missing item. A lost something. A small shift in the room. Mrs. Bantry moved toward Miss Marple, her face bright with effort, her voice a bit breathless. Jane, thank goodness. We're one chair short again. Someone walked off with them last week. Honestly, I don't know why people can't leave things where they belong. Miss Marple smiled. Things wander, Dolly. Even chairs. Mrs. Bantry rolled her eyes but softened. Then she leaned closer, lowered her voice. Did you hear? Miss Pierce is missing her pattern book. The big one, the old one. She's in quite a state about it. Miss Marple looked toward Miss Pierce, saw the stiff shoulders, saw the way her hands moved faster than usual, saw the tension collected around her mouth. A missing pattern book mattered to her, deeply, and people rarely showed such tension without reason. The hall door opened. Everyone turned. A newcomer entered. Mrs. Lenton. Quiet woman. Neat coat. Soft steps. Eyes lowered. Expression tight. Mrs. Bantry waved. Come in, dear. We're just settling. Mrs. Lenton nodded. Barely smiled. Kept her hands clasped. Too tightly. Miss Marple noticed that. She always noticed hands first. The whispers shifted. Soft ripples. Newcomer talk. Curiosity. A mix of welcome and worry. Miss Pierce avoided looking at her. Pointedly. Deliberately. Another detail tucked neatly into Miss Marple's mind. Someone moved past Miss Marple. A young helper. Carrying yarn. She whispered under her breath. They're saying it again. About the book. That someone took it. Miss Marple kept her expression even. Calm. She turned slowly toward the table. Looked at the wool. Looked at the women. Tension lay thin across the room. Soft. Quiet. But present. The missing book was only the beginning. She felt that now. Felt it in the rhythm of the room. Felt it in the silence around certain names. She touched her shawl lightly. A habit. A thinking gesture. Something was wrong here. Soft wrong. Kiet. Wrong. But wrong. And then Mrs. Bantry said it aloud. The words drifted across the hall. Someone knows where that pattern book is, and they're not saying. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple turned just as Mrs. Lenton dropped something small from her pocket. The knitting circle settled slowly. Chairs filled. Yarn baskets shifted. Soft chatter rose, then softened again. The usual rhythm. Comfortable, but small changes hid inside it. Little breaks in the pattern. Miss Marple saw them at once. Mrs. Lenton sat near the hall door. Quiet place. Half shadow. Hands folded too tightly in her lap. Eyes moving more than her fingers. She kept glancing toward the door. Quick looks. Short, sharp movements. Almost counting the seconds between each glance. Not waiting for someone. Not quite. More like watching for something to happen. Something she expected. Or feared. Miss Marple noted the tension in her shoulders. Lifted slightly. Then dropped. Then lifted again. A rhythm of unease. Across the room, Miss Pierce bent over her basket. Her sorting was no longer smooth. No longer calm. Her hands trembled slightly. Just a small shiver. Barely visible. She reached into her bag. Pulled out a small notebook. Very small. Worn edges. A ribbon tucked inside. But she didn't open it. Didn't show it. She slid it under her shawl. Quick motion. Hidden. Guarded. Miss Marple tilted her head. Just a fraction. A quiet sign of thought. A notebook under a shawl. A missing pattern book. A newcomer watching the door. Threads forming. Soft threads. But threads. Mrs. Bantry leaned toward Miss Marple. Lowered her voice. As if the walls themselves might listen. Jane, did you notice? They're still not speaking. 2 weeks now. Miss Marple kept her gaze steady. Which two, Dolly? Mrs. Bantry nudged her chin toward the far table. Mrs. Hardwick, Mrs. Felton, both knitting, both silent, too silent. Once they were inseparable. Same patterns, same gossip, same tea breaks. Now they sat apart. Backs stiff, eyes narrowed, needles clicking at different speeds. Something had broken there. Miss Marple could feel it. A quiet crack. A sharp one. Thin as a sliver of glass. Mrs. Bantry sighed. They won't admit it, of course. But everyone knows there was a quarrel. Something about wool. or money, or pride. It changes every day. Miss Marple nodded gently. People rarely told the truth about quarrels. Not right away. Too much pride. Too much fear of embarrassment. Her eyes drifted back to Mrs. Lenton. Another glance at the door. Longer this time. A breath caught in her throat. A small swallow. More nervous than before. Someone had unsettled her. Recently. Deeply. Miss Marple studied her hands. The skin around the knuckles was tight. She had been clenching them earlier. Hard. A quiet sign of worry. On the other side of the hall, Miss Pierce clutched her shawl tighter, protecting the hidden notebook, checking it every few seconds, adjusting the fabric, touching the edge. A nervous routine. Miss Marple watched it all. Silent. Still. Letting the details settle. Letting her mind arrange them. Nothing connected yet. But patterns always emerged. Always. If one waited long enough. She turned her attention to Mrs. Hardwick and Mrs. Felton. No words exchanged. No glances. Just cold space between them. Disagreements left marks. Often louder than arguments. Silence could shout. Miss Marple knew that well. The room shifted again. Small. Barely there. But felt. Mrs. Lenton looked at the door once more. This time her breath shivered. Miss Marple saw it. Noticed the tremor. Filed it away. Something outside that door troubled her. Or someone. Miss Marple adjusted her shawl. Slow movement. Thoughtful. Soft. The room hummed with hidden tensions. Threads crossing. Threads breaking. Threads pulling tight. And then Mrs. Lenton's foot nudged something. On the floor. A tiny object. Moved just an inch. Just enough for Miss Marple to see its edge. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple leaned forward because the object looked exactly like a torn piece of a pattern book. Tea break arrived with its usual calm. Chairs eased back. Needles paused. Hands stretched. Small sighs of relief passed around the hall. The young helper brought out the tray. Simple wooden tray. Neat row of cups. Steam rising in gentle curls. Nothing unusual. Nothing loud. She moved from table to table. Soft footsteps. Soft voice. Offering cups with a polite smile. Miss Marple accepted hers. Warm. Light scent of mild tea. Comforting. Mrs. Bantry accepted hers too. Commented on the temperature. Nothing more. Miss Pierce reached out next. Her hand trembled slightly. Not fear, just strain. Stress from the missing pattern book, perhaps. Or something deeper. She took a sip. Small. Careful. Eyes half-focused on the tray. As if counting cups. As if checking something. Conversation rolled gently around the room. Short lines. Little laughs. Knitting stories. Everyday comforts. Then Miss Pierce paused. Just a moment. Just long enough for a shift. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Her shoulders pulled in. A faint cough escaped her. Barely noticeable at first. Another cough. Sharper. Shorter. More forced. The room quieted a little. People turned their heads. Just slightly. Just enough to see. Miss Pierce's breath hitched. Her eyes widened. Her hand shook. The cup rattled softly against the saucer. Then she sank back into her chair. Slow. Unsteady. As if the air had grown too heavy. As if her body had suddenly lost strength. She tried to speak. One word. Half a breath. Nothing more. The room froze. Even the knitting needles seemed to stop breathing. A startled hush fell over the circle. No one moved at first. Then several women rose at once. Chairs scraped lightly. Gasps fluttered through the hall. Miss Marple stood. Calm. Steady. Aware. Her eyes moved quickly but gently. Cup. Hands. Breath. Color of the face. Everything in quiet order. Mrs. Bantry rushed forward. Oh dear. Oh dear. Her voice wavered, but Miss Marple raised a hand. Light gesture. Not to silence. Just to steady the room. Give her space, she said softly. Calm tone. Even tone. No alarm. Miss Pierce slumped deeper, her eyes closed, a faint tremor at the corner of her mouth. Someone cried out. Someone else whispered a prayer. Miss Marple leaned closer, not touching, just observing. Her gaze moved to the tray the young helper still held, still balanced in trembling hands. 5 cups, 1 empty place. A missing cup, a clear gap, too clear. Miss Marple's eyes lowered. She counted the women who had taken tea, counted the cups left. The numbers did not match. She looked at the young helper, gently. "Did you set 6 cups on the tray?" The girl nodded, her face pale. 6. Yes, 6, I'm sure. Miss Marple nodded once. Soft deduction forming, quiet logic unfolding. Someone had taken the missing cup before Miss Pierce fell, and that someone had not returned it. She lifted her own cup slightly, studied the rim, the scent, the color. Then she looked toward the hall door. Just a brief look, just enough to think. A missing cup meant something, something deliberate, something hidden. The room filled again with small cries, small questions, little waves of fear. Miss Marple's mind worked quietly beneath it all. More details, more threads, more soft clues. 1 cup missing, 1 woman collapsing, 1 quiet hall full of tension. She stood up straighter, touched Mrs. Bantry's arm, calm voice. "Call the doctor, Dolly. No panic, just fact, just necessity." Then she turned to the tray again. Not for the tea, but for the pattern hidden beneath the moment. Cliffhanger. At the far table, Miss Marple saw a scrap of wool, the same dark thread she found on the cup at her cottage. Mrs. Bantry cried out first, sharp breath, worried voice. "Someone help her. Please. Someone help her." Chairs moved. Hands fluttered. A few women stood, unsure what to do next. The room felt crowded with fear, yet quiet in sound. Miss Marple stepped closer to Miss Pierce, slow, measured, soft. She never rushed in these moments. Miss Pierce's cup lay on the floor, tilted, a small spill beside it, just enough to mark the boards. Miss Marple crouched carefully. Her knees protested, but she ignored them. She lifted the cup gently, 2 fingers only. Light touch. The young helper hurried forward, wide eyes, shaking hands. I didn't know. Miss Marple looked up at her, calm, steady. "You handed her this cup?" The girl nodded, then stopped. Shook her head. Confusion trembled across her face. No, someone gave it to me. An extra cup. I didn't set it on the tray at first. I swear I didn't." A murmur spread through the hall. Short gasps, quick glances, tiny shifts of feet. Miss Marple watched the girl closely, not accusing, just observing. "Who handed you the extra cup?" The girl swallowed. I don't know. A hand came from behind. Just put the cup on the tray. I didn't see the face." Another ripple went through the circle. Unease. Soft panic tucked under polite whispers. Miss Marple lowered her eyes to the cup. She brought it closer to her nose. Just enough to sense, just enough to detect. A faint scent lingered on the rim. Not tea. Something sharper, thinner, barely there. She did not react outwardly. Her expression stayed gentle, mild, thoughtful. Her thumb slid along the handle, lightly. A tiny smear touched her glove. Dark, thin. A single thread caught against the porcelain. Dark wool, short piece. Not frayed, clean cut, recognizable. The same thread from her cottage. The same thread under Miss Pierce's hand earlier. The same thread brushing against Mrs. Lenton's shoe. Miss Marple folded the detail into her thoughts. Quietly, neatly, without alarm. Mrs. Bantry knelt beside Miss Pierce. Her voice trembled. "She's breathing, Jane. Faint, but breathing." Miss Marple nodded. "That's good, Dolly." Soft words, steady tone. Others gathered in small clusters, hands pressed against mouths, eyes wet, fear rising in careful waves. Miss Marple straightened, her back slow but strong. She placed the cup on the nearest table, separate from the others, away from the spill. The young helper moved closer. "Miss Marple, I didn't mean to do anything wrong." Miss Marple touched the girl's hand. Warm, gentle, reassuring. "I know, dear. You did what you thought was right." The girl exhaled shakily, relief mixed with dread. Her shoulders sagged. Miss Marple looked across the hall, at the women, at their hands, at their faces, at the shifting eyes. The pattern was taking shape, slowly, softly, but clearly. A missing pattern book, a hidden notebook, a dark thread on a poisoned cup, an extra cup placed by an unseen hand. Small clues, quiet clues, but enough. She turned her gaze back to the door. The door Mrs. Lenton kept watching, the one someone had passed through, or planned to, or feared to. Suspicion settled like dust, light, soft, but impossible to ignore. Someone in this room had acted quickly, silently, deliberately, and Miss Marple now knew one truth. The poisoned cup was not placed in panic. It was placed with purpose. She touched the dark thread again, rolled it gently between her fingers. Cliffhanger. She lifted her head because someone across the hall was staring at that thread with far too much fear in their eyes. Morning came quietly. Soft light, slow steps. Miss Marple moved through her cottage with her usual calm. She set her teapot on the table. Simple, comforting. A small, steady start to the day. Then she placed the items before her, one by one. Neat arrangement, clear space. The letter, the fallen cup, the dark thread, 3 clues, 3 small pieces. Nothing loud, nothing large, but enough to begin. She unfolded the letter first. Read the line again. Ask her why she lied. Short, without warmth, without context. Someone in the village felt wronged. Someone wanted truth uncovered. Someone trusted Miss Marple more than themselves. She pressed her palm lightly on the paper, feeling its thinness, its slight tremble, a message delivered with hesitation. Then she lifted the cup, held it at an angle, examined the rim. The faint scent remained, sharp, quiet, hidden beneath the leftover tea. Miss Marple inhaled gently. Not deeply, just enough. Her expression remained still, no reaction, only a soft narrowing of thought. She looked at the handle next. There it was, that tiny smear, that dark thread. She touched it with the tip of a pencil, lifted it, held it near the window. Dark color, deep tone, a neat cut at one end. No fraying, no tearing. She knew this wool. Every knitter in the village had their own style, their own favorite type, their own touch. This one belonged to a single person. Only one. Mrs. Lenton. No one else used that shade. No one else bought it regularly. No one else insisted on that exact blend. Miss Marple placed the thread beside the letter, side by side. Clue next to warning. Then she placed the cup behind them. A quiet triangle, a shape with intention, a pattern forming. Her mind shifted gently through memories of the night before. Mrs. Lenton watching the door. Mrs. Lenton sitting alone, her hands tight, her breath uneven, and the small object she'd dropped. Just a glimpse, just enough to suggest a link. Miss Marple poured her tea, sipped, let the heat settle in her chest. Warm, steady, grounding her. Thoughts. Ask her why she lied. The letter whispered again in her mind. A push, a nudge, a direction. Someone believed a lie had been told. Someone believed Mrs. Lenton knew something she shouldn't, or claimed something she shouldn't, or hid something she couldn't bear to keep hidden anymore. Miss Marple lifted the thread again, rolled it between her fingers. Soft texture, specific weave. Wool said much about a person. Choice, habit, care, desire. Every knitter revealed themselves through their yarn. Mrs. Lenton had revealed more than she meant. Miss Marple folded the letter carefully, stacked the 3 clues together, placed them into her small basket. Not hidden, not obvious, just ready. She stood, tied her shawl, buttoned her cardigan, prepared herself for a quiet walk. The kettle clicked behind her, a soft reminder of the morning's routine. But her mind was no longer on tea. It was on the knock that never came, the footsteps on her path, the hesitation outside her door. A visitor had come last night, someone uncertain, someone afraid, someone who needed her help, and Miss Marple felt certain now who that someone might be. She opened her front door. Cool air brushed her face, calm, gentle. She stepped outside, turned right, path toward the row of cottages, toward the quiet house with the drawn curtains. Mrs. Lenton's house. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple tightened her shawl because someone was already standing at Mrs. Lenton's gate. Miss Marple reached Mrs. Lenton's gate with quiet steps. The woman stood there already, hands clasped, eyes down, breath unsteady. She looked up when Miss Marple approached. A small start, then a sigh, almost relief, almost fear. "Mrs. Lenton," Miss Marple said softly. "May we talk a moment?" The woman nodded, slow, hesitant. She opened the gate and let Miss Marple walk beside her. Inside the small sitting room, Mrs. Lenton sat first, shoulders tight, fingers twisting a piece of dark wool. The same shade, the same texture. Miss Marple noticed it without comment. She always noticed. "I suppose you heard," Mrs. Lenton whispered. "About Miss Pierce. About the collapse." Miss Marple nodded gently. "Yes." Mrs. Lenton swallowed. Her throat moved with effort. "It wasn't me," she said quickly. Too quickly. The kind of speed that came from worry, not guilt. Miss Marple remained calm. "I didn't say it was." Silence filled the room. Soft, heavy. Then Mrs. Lenton spoke again. "We argued, you know." Her voice barely above a murmur. "Miss Pierce and I." Miss Marple folded her hands. "About what, dear?" Mrs. Lenton looked away. Her eyes shifted to the unused fireplace. "A knitting competition. Years ago. She said I stole her design. I didn't, but she believed it." A deep breath. Shaky. Every time she saw me, she found a way to mention it. A little jab. A reminder. It never stopped. Old wounds, small but sharp. The kind that fester quietly. Miss Marple listened without interrupting, letting the pauses speak. Mrs. Lenton pressed her hands together. "I know how it looks. Me watching the door yesterday. Me sitting apart. Me dropping that paper scrap." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "You were frightened." Mrs. Lenton nodded. Tears gathered. "I was. I thought someone was following me. I thought they might confront me at the hall. That's why I kept looking at the door." Another pause. A trembling breath. "But I didn't go near the tea tray. I didn't touch anything." Miss Marple let her words settle. Truth carried a rhythm, a tone. This felt like truth, or close to it. Before she could ask more, there came a knock at the door. Light. Fast. A child's knock. Mrs. Lenton opened it. A small boy from the hall stood outside. Red cheeks, big eyes, a little nervous. I need to tell Miss Marple something," he said. She crouched slightly to meet his gaze. "Go on, dear." "I saw it," he whispered. "The switch. Someone switched a cup. Before tea break." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Who did, child?" He shook his head. "I didn't see the face. Just the hands. White gloves. Short gloves." Miss Marple nodded slowly. White gloves. Not many wore them. One clue tucked itself neatly beside the others. The boy looked scared now. "I didn't tell anyone else. Only you." Miss Marple thanked him, sent him back toward the lane. Mrs. Lenton closed the door with trembling fingers. "There's more, Miss Marple," she whispered. "Something else." Miss Marple waited. Still, calm. "It's not just me Miss Pierce accused." "Mrs. Lenton said. She accused someone else. Someone she shouldn't have. Someone who had everything to lose." Miss Marple tilted her head. "Who?" Mrs. Lenton hesitated. Fear shadowed her face. "She told. The vicar last week. Said someone stole money from the charity wool fund." A quiet breath escaped her lips. She said she knew the thief. Miss Marple stayed silent. Let the meaning settle. A different motive. A hidden one. Stronger than rivalry. Stronger than pride. Then Mrs. Lenton whispered the final twist. Soft. Unsteady. Miss Pierce was wrong about me. She swallowed. Hard. But she was right about someone else. Cliffhanger. She looked Miss Marple in the eye and whispered a single name. Miss Marple returned to the parish hall after leaving Mrs. Lenton's cottage. Quiet steps, calm breath, thoughts neatly arranged, each clue placed where it belonged. The hall sat empty now, chairs stacked, tables cleared, only the knitting baskets remained. Miss Marple walked toward them, slow pace, gentle rhythm, letting her eyes move over each basket. Shapes, colors, small details. Knitting baskets always told stories. Who rushed? Who worried? Who hid things? Who couldn't help themselves? She touched each handle lightly, testing weight, testing balance. A basket heavier than usual might hold more than wool. Nothing unusual at first. Loose yarn, needles, scraps, patterns tucked neatly inside. But Miss Marple never trusted the first glance. Surface order often hid quiet trouble. She moved to the wool bin next, a large wooden box. Donations sorted here. Miss Pierce managed it every week. Her pride, her duty. Miss Marple lifted a few skeins, moved them aside, checked the corners, checked beneath the folded cloth cover. All ordinary, all expected. Then her hand brushed the back panel. A small gap, barely there, just enough space for something thin, something hidden. She pressed gently. The panel shifted. Not much, but enough to suggest it had been moved before. Enough to reveal a sliver of fabric caught in the crack. Dark fabric, a familiar shade. The same dark wool thread from the cup. Miss Marple eased the panel open with 2 fingers. Careful, unhurried. A small pouch lay behind it. Neat, flat, hidden with purpose, not forgotten placed. She lifted it out, felt the weight. Not heavy, not light, something inside. She opened the pouch, slowly, edges soft from handling. Inside sat the missing pattern book, the old one, the valuable one, the one Miss Pierce guarded more than her own gloves, except it was damaged now. A page missing. Clean tear, deliberate tear. Not an accident. Miss Marple turned the book over in her hands. Checked the spine, checked the corners, checked the pockets in the back. A slip of paper fell out. Thin, folded once. She opened it. Read the message. This time she will understand. Short line. Firm writing. The same handwriting as the first letter, the same shape of the letters, the same pressure on the strokes. Miss Marple closed the note, placed it next to the book, then looked at the torn page. A jagged edge. Not. Hidden in the pouch. Not included. Missing. Someone had taken that page. Someone needed it. Someone believed Miss Pierce deserved the message. The warning. Or the lesson. Or the threat. Miss Marple laid all the items on the table. Neatly. Precisely. Letter. Pouch. Pattern book. Note. Threads of logic linked them now. Clear lines. Clear motives forming. But not complete. Not yet. She pressed her fingertips together. A habit when thinking deeply. A gesture of quiet calculation. Why hide the book here? Why tear only one page? Why leave the message? Why risk placing it close to the scene? Someone wanted to be found. Not fully, just partly, just enough to nudge suspicion. Someone wanted Miss Pierce frightened. Not necessarily harmed, but frightened. Miss Marple breathed softly, a thought settling, a name forming, a quiet truth beginning to surface. Then she lifted the pouch again, turned it over. One more slip of paper fell out. Smaller, crinkled. She opened it. Read a single word, a name, written quickly, without care. And the name did not belong to Mrs. Lenton. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed because the name belonged to someone who should never have touched that pattern book at all. Miss Marple found Miss Pierce's daughter at the small cottage behind the post office. Quiet garden. Quiet steps. A girl sitting on the low bench, hands tightly clasped. She looked up when Miss Marple approached. Eyes red, breath uneven, clearly waiting for someone, or dreading someone. "May I sit?" Miss Marple asked gently. The girl nodded, barely. Miss Marple lowered herself beside her. Calm, soft presence, no pressure, no judgment. The girl spoke first. Fast, too fast, like a dam giving way. "I did it," she said. "I stole the pattern book." Miss Marple listened quietly. No reaction, just steady attention. The girl swallowed. "My mother, she's so proud of her patterns, so proud of everything she makes. And the competition is next month." She kept talking about it. Her voice cracked. I found her crying. She thought her newest pattern wasn't good enough. She said she'd embarrass herself, that everyone would see she wasn't as talented as before. The girl's fingers twisted around each other, tight, fretful. "So I took the book," she whispered. "Hid it. Thought if she didn't enter, she wouldn't have to lose, wouldn't feel ashamed." A long breath escaped her, shaky, small. I tore out the page she liked most, hid it separately. I thought she'd give up trying to use it. Miss Marple nodded once, slow, understanding the logic, not approving, just understanding. "You meant to protect her," Miss Marple said softly. The girl nodded quickly. "I did. I swear I did. I only wanted to help." Her eyes filled again, tears waiting. She wiped them away with the back of her hand. "But the tea," her voice dropped. "I never touched the tea. I never went near the tray." Miss Marple's gaze was gentle. "You didn't." The girl blinked. "You believe me?" Miss Marple offered a small smile. "I do." Because the rhythm of her confession matched fear, not guilt. Because the details aligned with kindness, not harm. Because her hands shook in confusion, not concealment. Because her eyes never hid when she spoke. Miss Marple folded her hands neatly in her lap. "And the torn page?" The girl pointed toward her bag. "It's still there, hidden. I didn't know what to do after she collapsed. I planned to return everything quietly." Miss Marple reached out, touched the girl's hand, warm, steady. "You've carried a heavy worry," she said. The girl nodded again, silent now, tired. Miss Marple stood, slow, deliberate. "You should stay with your mother," she said. "The doctor will want to ask you questions later, but you've told the truth. That matters." The girl exhaled, relief mixed with fear, but something eased in her shoulders. Miss Marple turned toward the path, her steps thoughtful, measured. The confession explained the pattern book, explained the torn page, explained the pouch, but not the tea, not the missing cup, not the dark thread on the handle, not the second note. Someone else wove their own pattern into this, a darker one. Miss Marple paused at the gate, looked back. The girl sat small and fragile on the bench. Not a murderer, not even close. But someone had used her mistake, used it to hide another plan, a far more deliberate one. Miss Marple tightened her shawl. The wind shifted, a faint sound brushed her ear. A footstep, light, tentative, cliffhanger. She turned and saw someone watching her from behind the hedgerow, someone who slipped away the moment she met their eyes. Miss Marple returned to the parish hall with quiet steps. The door gave a soft creak as she entered. Empty room, still air, everything left as it had been after the collapse. She paused just inside the doorway, took in the layout. Chairs, tables, knitting baskets. Nothing moved, nothing touched. But the room always spoke, softly, patiently. Miss Marple only needed to listen. She walked toward the chairs first, slow, gentle pace, eyes low, hands clasped loosely behind her back. Most chairs sat exactly where they had been, grouped in small circles, a few slightly askew from the commotion. Miss Marple bent to check each leg. Dust, wool scraps, a few stray pins, all ordinary for a knitting circle. Then she reached the chair where Mrs. Lenton had Saturday front row, near the door, half turned toward the exit. Miss Marple crouched again, took her time, let her eyes adjust. There, a small thread caught in the back leg, dark, tight, same shade as the one on the cup. She touched it lightly, lifted it with the point of her knitting needle, examined the fibers, same thickness, same texture, same distinctive color, the same wool Mrs. Lenton always used, the same type Miss Marple found at her own cottage, the same thread near the pattern book's hidden pouch. But the placement troubled her. Mrs. Lenton's chair, a thread caught low, as if stuck there before she sat down. Not after. Miss Marple straightened slowly, let her mind trace possibilities. Quiet logic, soft deduction, no rush, no leaps. She moved to the table next. The tea tray sat where it had been placed in the panic, cups slightly uneven, one missing spot still visible, a small empty ring of moisture marking where a cup should have been. Miss Marple touched the tray's edge. Warm yesterday, cold now. She checked the napkins beside it, a few used, a few untouched. Nothing unusual. Then she bent to the floor. Tea stains, a few crumbs, more stray threads, different colors, bright reds, soft blues, yellows, but not the dark shade. Not the one tied to fear. Not the one tied to the collapse. She turned toward the wool bin, ran her hand along its edge, checked the hidden panel again. Empty now. Nothing left behind. The torn page still missing. The pouch emptied. The pattern book recovered. But something shifted in her understanding. A soft click of truth. A gentle rearranging. She walked back to Mrs. Lenton's chair, stood over it, observing, thinking, turning the detail in her mind. The dark thread meant proximity, but not guilt, not automatically, not with the way the thread lay. It sat under the chair leg, not on top, caught before the meeting began, not during the tea passing. Someone else had brushed past that chair earlier. Someone else had passed too close. Someone else had moved through the hall when few were watching. Miss Marple exhaled slowly, a soft breath, a measured acceptance. Her earlier assumption that the thread from Mrs. Lenton's wool meant she handled the cup no longer held. Threads told stories, yes, but placement told truth. This one spoke quietly. Mrs. Lenton was near the trouble, but not the one who caused it. Miss Marple stood still for a long moment, hands folded, eyes narrowed just slightly. She let the silence settle, let the clues fall into place, let the picture form. Then she turned toward the back of the hall. A small sound had come from there, a shuffle, barely audible, barely real. Someone else was here, someone watching, someone waiting. Cliffhanger. Miss Marple took a single step as a shadow slipped behind the storage curtain at the far end of the hall. Miss Marple remained still near the storage curtain. No rush, no sudden movement, only quiet thoughts settling into place. She let the hall fall silent again, let the memory of yesterday's gathering return. Tea break, cups, movement, small details rising in order. She closed her eyes for a moment, replayed the scene in her mind, piece by piece, slow, precise, gentle, logic guiding every step. The young helper carried the tray first. 2 hands, steady hold, 6 cups arranged neatly. Miss Marple remembered that clearly. Nothing strange then. No extra cup. No added hands. Then the girl walked toward the first table. Mrs. Bantry took her cup. A brief smile. A soft comment. Next came Miss Felton. Then Mrs. Hardwick. Routine. Predictable. Just tea among friends. But something small happened. A shift. A pause in the girl's steps. Miss Marple replayed it carefully. The tray dipped, just slightly, not from weight, not from clumsiness, but from an interruption. A hand had reached in, from the side, a gloved hand, short white glove. The child later confirmed that. He saw the switch, saw the motion, not the face. Miss Marple breathed lightly, let the memory sharpen. The extra cup, placed before tea break, before the helper moved from table to table, before Miss Pierce raised her cup. Someone placed a cup already prepared, already chosen, already meant for someone. Miss Marple opened her eyes again, looked toward the space where the tray had rested before service. A narrow table, a folded cloth, a place where the girl had set it down for only a few seconds. Only a few seconds, but enough time. She traced the positions in her mind. Miss Bantry nearest, Mrs. Lenton by the door, Mrs. Felton at the far end, Miss Pierce opposite the wool bin, the young helper near the tray, then the moment, the one that stood out now, the extra cup, appearing too early, before the helper lifted the tray again, before the chatter resumed, before anyone realized the arrangement had changed. Someone acted before the collapse, not in panic, not in error, quietly, deliberately. While the room still felt safe, Miss Marple replayed the hands. Every gesture, every reach. Mrs. Bantry wore gardening gloves earlier that day, but she had taken them off, left them in her basket. Mrs. Hardwick wore no gloves at W. All. Never did. Said gloves made her fingers feel trapped. Mrs. Felton wore lace gloves, long ones, not short white ones. Mrs. Lenton wore dark gloves outside, but inside? No. Her gloves were folded in her coat pocket. Miss Marple had seen them. Miss Pierce had no gloves, not yesterday, not the day before, not when sorting wool. That left one person, a person often overlooked, a person who came and went quietly, a person who handled the tray most often, a person everyone trusted without question. Miss Marple breathed out, a small, controlled breath. She replayed the moment once more, saw the hand, short glove, white, clean, unmarked, precise. The extra cup was placed by someone who stood close to the tray before the tea was even lifted. Someone comfortable touching kitchen things, someone near the supplies, someone who had no one watching them. A contradiction formed, clear, solid, unshakable. Mrs. Lenton could not have done it. She sat far from the tray, too far, too tense, too watched. The clues shifted, rearranged, pointed elsewhere. Someone else was involved. Not a rival knitter, not a jealous competitor, not an embarrassed daughter. Another hand entirely, a hand wearing white gloves. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Only one person in the hall wore white gloves that day. Only one. Cliffhanger. And that person was now standing quietly in the doorway behind her, waiting for Miss Marple to turn around. Evening settled gently over Street Mary Mead. Quiet. Still. The kind of hour that softened voices and slowed steps. Miss Marple waited inside the parish hall. Lights low, tables cleared, knitting baskets placed neatly in a row, each one exactly where she wanted it. A soft knock came at the door, faint, cautious. "Come in, dear," Miss Marple called. Mrs. Lenton stepped inside, hands tight around her bag, breath short, eyes unsettled. She looked at the row of baskets, then at Miss Marple. Confusion flickered across her face. Worry followed. "You asked me to come," she whispered. "Is something wrong?" Miss Marple gestured toward the table. "Just a small matter I wish to clear up." They walked together, slow, measured, soft steps echoing lightly in the empty hall. Miss Marple rested her hand on one basket, then another, then stopped at the one belonging to Mrs. Lenton, dark yarn inside, the familiar shade. She looked at Mrs. Lenton gently, voice calm, even, precise. "May I ask you one question?" Mrs. Lenton nodded, barely, fear tightening her mouth. Miss Marple held up the dark thread she had taken from the cup, thin, short, recognizable. "Why," Miss Marple asked softly, "was this thread on Miss Pierce's cup?" The room stilled. Even the dust seemed to settle mid-air. Mrs. Lenton froze. Her breath caught. Her fingers twitched around the strap of her bag. Her eyes widened. A long moment passed. Quiet. Heavy. I didn't. But the words wouldn't come. Her throat closed around them. Silence pressed between them like a wall. Miss Marple watched her closely. Not accusing. Not harsh, just observing, just listening, just waiting. Mrs. Lenton shook her head. Once, twice, slow, uncertain. "I didn't touch the tea," she whispered. "I didn't. I swear I didn't." Miss Marple nodded lightly. "I know." That simple answer startled Mrs. Lenton. Her head jerked slightly. Her eyes darted to Miss Marple's face. You know?" "Yes." Miss Marple tapped the chair behind them. "The thread was under your chair before you ever sat down. It was placed there, by someone else." Mrs. Lenton's knees weakened. She gripped the table edge. Relief and confusion tangled in her breath. "Then why ask me?" she whispered. Miss Marple's gaze softened. "To see how you would react, to confirm what I already suspected." And then it happened. A tiny sound. Soft, barely heard. Something slipped from Mrs. Lenton's knitting bag. A folded scrap of paper. Thin, torn along one edge. Familiar. It fluttered to the floor. Landed near Miss Marple's shoe. Miss Marple bent down slowly, picked it up, opened it. A torn pattern page. The missing page. The page Miss Pierce treasured most. Mrs. Lenton gasped. "No, that's not mine, I didn't." But the words fell apart. Her hands trembled. Her face drained of color. Miss Marple studied the page, looked at the rip, the crease, the ink note at the corner. This page hadn't been torn in panic. It had been torn days earlier, folded carefully, carried deliberately, and someone had slipped it into Mrs. Lenton's bag. Someone who wanted suspicion, pointed in one direction, a quiet direction, an easy direction. Someone who understood fear and used it. Miss Marple closed the page, slow, decisive. Her voice lowered, gentle, firm. "There is one more. Person we must speak to tonight." Mrs. Lenton swallowed hard. "Who?" Miss Marple turned toward the door, toward the darkened hall beyond it, toward the person she now knew had orchestrated everything. Cliffhanger. She lifted the torn page just as a faint knock sounded at the parish hall entrance, a knock Miss Marple had been expecting. Miss Marple waited until the hall grew still again. Soft air, low light, only the quiet between two women. She spoke gently, no sharpness, no accusation, just truth set down with care. "Mrs. Lenton," you placed the cup. The woman flinched. Her hands folded into themselves. A small sound escaped her. Miss Marple continued, voice steady. "You prepared one cup before anyone arrived." A quiet moment. No one watching. No one questioning. A tear slid down Mrs. Lenton's cheek. She tried to speak, but her breath caught. "You feared Miss Pierce," Miss Marple went on softly. "Feared what she might reveal. The old competitions, the prizes, the designs you borrowed." Mrs. Lenton covered her face, shame trembling in her shoulders. "You lived with that humiliation for years," Miss Marple said. Every small comment from her felt like a reminder. A wound reopened, a pride bruised again and again. Mrs. Lenton sobbed once, quiet, broken. "You thought the only way to silence her was to stop her," Miss Marple finished. "Not out of hatred, but out of fear." Mrs. Lenton looked up slowly. Eyes red, voice barely sound. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." Miss Marple nodded gently. "I know. But truth, once spoken, cannot turn back." Miss Marple sat at her small kitchen table. Simple tea, soft steam rising, evening quiet holding the room together. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Let the heat settle into her fingers. Let her thoughts settle too. Pride could twist a gentle heart, she reflected. Small grudges could grow in shadows. Kindness, left unattended, could fade. People rarely meant harm at first, but fear had a way of guiding the wrong hand. She sighed, not with sadness, with understanding. Miss Pierce would recover. Mrs. Lenton would face her truth, and the village in time would mend itself. The kettle hissed softly behind her, a friendly sound, a reminder of ordinary comfort. Miss Marple lifted her cup, took a slow sip, let wisdom settle quietly beside her. Truth sits quietly, she murmured, even when we ignore it. Outside, the village rested, calm again. Davis returns with a soft, familiar warmth in his voice. Thank you, dear listeners, for sharing another quiet mystery with us tonight. He pauses, inviting reflection. Tell me, which clue stood out to you the most? And where are you listening from tonight? A gentle smile in his tone. I read every comment, and it means more than you know. He encourages them kindly. If you enjoyed this cozy tale, stay with us, and don't miss tomorrow's story. A final warm closing. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil. A single knitting basket rests on the table, yarn tucked neatly inside. Beside it, the folded pattern book edges soft with use. Across the room, a small cottage window glows gently in the evening hush. Warm light, quiet promise. A cup sits beside the yarn, steam fading, calm settling. The scene holds stillness, soft, steady, peaceful, and then a gentle fade to calm.